just go ahead and say hi in the chat feature as well. That way we can make sure everyone's here. And then at the end, we'll probably do a bye as well at some point too. Thanks, guys. All right. So let's do, y'all can all mute now. And there, that should go. All right. So Mr. Sheedy, if you want to start, we'll start with you. And if you want to kind of give everyone a little introduction, we've got your slides over here as well.
Yeah, great. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for giving me your Friday afternoon time slot here. Hopefully we'll have a fun interactive session and you guys will learn some stuff out of today. So my name is Justin Sheedy, and I've been in San Antonio for about 20 years. I graduated from Texas State up in San Marcos, and then got an opportunity to move to San Antonio to sell hardware and software. So I've been in San Antonio in a sales capacity for most of my career and have really enjoyed it. So I'm excited to be talking to you guys today, talking through a little bit more about sales and then how you should be thinking about your sales plans and building out target lists and kind of going after you're refining your pitch and talking through all the different aspects of taking your ideas to market. So hopefully it'll be informative. So thanks for everybody saying hi there on the side chat window. Man, that's a busy screen. So bear with me there. So as I said, got to start in technology sales here with a local reseller. Then I also spent a long time in my career early on with a company called Rackspace here in town. That's also where Henry Sauer and some of the other folks involved in Incubator know me through or have worked at one point in their life. There, I was able to be part of the growing sales team, kind of take it from startup stage all the way into a public company, and actually had the opportunity to sell some of the largest deals that they ever did in company history early on. So that was exciting. From there, moved on to a software company that got acquired by Hewlett Packard, and then also to another software company that's called VMware that does virtualization computing technology, basically enables cloud computing. And from there, got on at Microsoft, where I've been for about 5 years. So I've been blessed to have a pretty good run with a lot of household name technology companies. And sales has really been a good career. I was attracted to it because of the variable income factor that you have in a sales role, and obviously how hard you work and how much you sell impacts how much you can make. So that's, you know, hopefully I heard from Mrs. Bartlett that when you guys were on, some of you folks were on a tour with some of these companies, and I think that maybe in the second year guys, wasn't a whole ton of interest in sales, but really from every single job type that you guys may be doing, whether you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or just a parent or a teacher, everything has some aspect of sales associated with it. So hopefully some of the things that we'll talk through today and that you guys will learn or can go back and review will help you at other points in your life. Obviously, all of you guys are going to have to do some selling of your own at some point. You're going to have to sell your parents on why they should, you know, let you go out or take a trip or get you a new car or whatever it might be. So hopefully some of the things we can keep it fun and interactive on going through that. So any questions in terms of what you guys like or really are hoping to learn beyond maybe the storytelling aspects that you did with Chris Burney or some of the initial pitch crafting that you guys have done really specific to sales? Feel free to either pop those up in a chat window or, you know, if you want to come off mute one at a time, and that will really be helpful to make sure that we kind of stay on message.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions? You're welcome to ask now if there's something that you're really interested in hearing about today. Remember that we always try to gear these sessions towards what y'all are most interested in. Anybody have any questions to start with before we get going?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay.
All right. We'll go ahead and move forward then.
Or wait, I had a question.
Okay, perfect.
Can you tell us a little bit about the patent you had?
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for picking that up. So actually, it's right over there on the wall. But Yeah. If you've ever been sitting around with your friends and thought of an idea and said we should get a patent for that, I would advise against it. It costs a lot of money and it's really hard to do. But no, basically, my friend and I had an idea for a boat bumper device to allow a boat bumper to remain in place whenever you raft your boats up together on the lake. So we were sitting around floating on the lake and came up with that idea, figured out there wasn't anything like that in place, and then spent the time and effort to actually get it patented. Unfortunately, we never really sold it or did anything with it. I think the goal was the patent, and we'll talk about that today, how you actually have to really set goals. And so if the goal was just to get the patent, which is basically what we did when we were younger, we didn't necessarily build a business plan to go beyond that. So it kind of faltered from there, and we lost interest in it. But I do have a patent, so hey.
That's a good question. Thanks, Gage.
Now it's a claim to fame. So yeah.
Okay, perfect.
All right. So some of the things we wanted to kind of cover from a lesson plan standpoint is really kind of understanding who your target prospects are, building a list, perfecting that pitch, and then kind of factoring in any costs of sales, whether you're paying a seller, whether there's a cost to do a transaction because you're selling your idea, your thing, your widget, your website through a third-party tool like Amazon or online, whether you're taking credit cards for whatever you do, and there's a fee associated with transacting with the big credit card companies. All of those costs of sales you want to factor in to your overall business plan and make sure you call those out. And having a good understanding of that is going to be critical when you pitch to investors so that they can understand how you replicate it. Also, I'd like to make sure we kind of go through just some of the validations and the pitch crafting that you guys can work on. I think oftentimes, especially when you're excited about an idea or you're passionate about something, which I assume all of you are because it's part of your team, there's a knee-jerk reaction to always just tell people about what you're doing, and that's good, but you want to make sure as a good seller, you really stop and listen to the prospects that you're talking to and understand what the challenge that they have is and whether or not your product or service or offering maps back to achieve that challenge. So is everybody hearing me all right? I want to make sure it's a little, the video is a little jerky on my side. So, all right. So let's see. I was going to try to throw out some fun facts. Does anybody have an idea of what an average close rate is for a good seasoned salesperson?
16%.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. Anybody else want to guess?
25%.
25%? Anybody else?
No Googling, guys.
Yeah. So yeah, 25 is pretty close. It's actually about 20% probably on average. So a good rule of thumb, if you need to sell 100 units or 100 things to be profitable, you're going to have to go talk to 400 people because on average you're going to close, 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 of those if you're really good. So keep that in mind. People talk about sales being a numbers game, but obviously you're going to have to build a plan that says, okay, in order to get 500 people potentially interested so that we can get 100, deals working and closed, and how long is that going to take? Think through, is your sale a transactional one, or is it a very long, slow sales process where multiple people are going to have to be involved? Who is going to be involved in that decision-making process, and how are different factors going to affect them in terms of making up their mind? Is it something that, again, is a very low cost and easy decision for them to make, or is it something that's going to be a much longer term where they want to involve multiple folks? So again, that's part of validating yourself up front. Just like when I came on today, I talked about the career that I've had and who I am, and sort of earned the right to talk to you today about sales because of the career that I've built in that field. And just as I'm sure all the other coaches who you talk to, whether it was legal or finance or some of the other folks with more of a startup background, all of these people were selected because they sort of have that validation. So it's important in your pitch to think about that when you're talking to a prospect, to earn the right to be talking to them or to have a reason why you may be soliciting them to potentially buy your offering. Make sense? All right. So what are some of the reasons that people are going to buy your products or your offerings or your things? I'm sure you guys have talked through this a little bit, but typically it's going to be to save them time, save them money, or solve some problem, or potentially reduce risk, right? So as people are making those decisions, typically how they're motivated is usually one or two ways. Does anybody know what kind of the main two motivating factors are when they talk about that? Maybe you've heard the phrase carrot and the stick. Basically, most people are either towards or away, meaning you're motivated to move towards something good that's positive, or you're avoiding moving away from something that's bad. So that's a good tool to use amongst your teams to really think through, are people buying our idea because it's attractive for them to move towards, or is it moving them away from something that's bad? An example would be, okay, I'm going to buy a security system because I want to protect, the home away from being robbed, right? But how I make that decision is because I feel that my family will be safer, which is, taking me towards something good. And again, most people tend to be towards motivated, but by asking questions, you can understand from your prospect how they individually are motivated, so that you can then position your offering to align with how they're going to be motivated to ultimately make that decision. Does that make sense? Just a thumbs up? Yes? No? Okay.
Thumbs up.
You got 37 more minutes of this. You can make it through. So, okay. So, one of the things we want to talk through is a targeted list of prospective buyers. So most of you guys, I'm sure, have talked to your parents, your family members, your mentors, and gotten them excited about what you're doing. That's another thing. I think some of you guys have actually had some sales. Is that correct? Maybe we can hear from Mrs. Bartlett or somebody else. Yes. Okay, great. So think through, why those folks that have had an initial win or two, and what else we can do to replicate that type of a buyer or that type of a prospect. So again, what does your solution solve for? What types of people would potentially buy off on you guys? That's where you want to be, obviously, prospecting, so that you're not wasting your time going after the wrong demographic, or spinning cycles with people who may or may not to lead to be one of those 20% folks that you can actually close. So a good way to start thinking through a prospect list is really just to identify where you've had wins already, and then ask those folks if they have referrals. Also to think through, okay, if we're targeting teens, or we're targeting folks that are seniors, or whatever it might be, how you can kind of replicate that list and go after those folks. Think through ways in which they buy. Now more than ever, your generation and generations after mine are going to educate themselves in different ways. They're going to use the internet and tools to really get up to speed on a product long before they may even talk to a salesperson. So you want to be thinking through that and really qualifying where they're at in that decision-making process prior to even talking to you or hearing about you. So,
I have a question. So okay. I know that some of our teams that have already made sales, do you have suggestions for them tracking their sales to try to, redefine who that target market might be, and so that they can increase sales?
Absolutely. So again, feel free to follow up with those folks and just, ask for the opportunity to say, why did you purchase this, and how is it going, and whom else do you think would benefit from this? Getting that feedback from your customers is extremely valuable to then know where to continue to prospect. Also, that's good feedback as you're prospecting. If folks are providing objections or saying, I don't think that's right, or I don't, it would really help us if it did this, but not that. That's a good way to use that to sort of refine maybe what your message is. Oftentimes, you have your good idea, and then you think, of course, it's a no-brainer for this, this, and this. A lot of times what we learn is there's other uses for that product that the market or the prospect may come up with that the person close to the company, didn't even think of. A good example this week, I'm actually working with a group of doctors who are going to use the Connect tool from an Xbox, which if any of you guys have an Xbox, is basically the scanning device that allows you to play interactive games like, Dance Dance and all that. So that device has an ability to scan somebody's face. They're going to leverage it to 3D print N95 masks with a computer program. So, not necessarily something that the designers of that Xbox gaming device thought of originally, but somebody out in the marketplace is going to potentially use it for that because they're trying to solve a problem in a unique way. So getting that feedback from your folks that you've already sold to is invaluable, and documenting that and then talking it through with your group, I think, can lead to where you should be prospecting and whom might also be saying yes. So
Thanks.
is there another question coming from the crowd there? No? Okay. Any other surfers? No? Okay. I'm not very good, but I have a surfboard hanging on my wall in San Antonio, 2 hours from the ocean. So, hey. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about a elevator pitch. I guess you guys have already done some work there. Yes. A good tool that I learned early on in my career is actually from a guy named Skip Miller, who wrote this book, Proactive Selling. He also has a couple others, Ultimate Sales Toolkit. He actually came into Rackspace and conducted some sales training for our team for several days, and then came back for some follow-ups. Obviously, you guys are close to your idea, your business, your thing that you've created. But when you're selling, make sure that you think about it's not about you, it's about them. So oftentimes you guys have probably all heard somebody who wants to sell you something, or maybe have a negative connotation of a salesperson because they're very pushy, or they're really trying to just regurgitate benefits of a product or speeds and feeds of a device. Again, making sure that you put that hat on, knowing it's about the prospect, not about you, and that you're really trying to listen for how they're motivated and what they're trying to save money, save time, or reduce risk by using your product or potentially giving you money for your product. So a good way to think about that is to have an intro about yourself. Again, hi, this is Sheridan. I'm with XYZ company. Some of the things that we do are blank, blank, and blank. So intro to validate and earn that right. And then 3 things quickly about yourself to continue to kind of get that prospect's time and attention. And then you also want to have 3 things that you're hearing from other prospects. So rather than saying, we solved this, or we helped that, or we reduced this, to put it in the phrase of some of the questions that we're hearing from prospects like you are, how am I going to be able to work from home whenever I don't have a computer, or how can I do this, or why is this going to be? Putting the things that you're offering solves for into a question format that person might be asking themselves is an extremely good technique to make that pitch about them rather than making it all about you or your offering or your company. And then you want to summarize it at the end, where you ask them a question to say, these are some of the things that we've heard, but what are you facing, in order to open the floor for them to give you feedback on why they may or may not be needing whatever it is that you're selling. So again, that's a quick intro, a few brief validating points. I'm a member of this team, or I'm a student at Alamo Heights in the Business Incubator program, and we have created a company that does blank. We identify the problem that blank, blank, and blank. Some of the things we're hearing are, how am I going to do this? Or I'm concerned about that, or I'm hoping to achieve this. These are what we've heard and allowed us to really go down the path and create this company. What are some of the things that you are challenged with that XYZ company may be able to help you solve? So again, really just putting it back and making it about your prospect is extremely valuable. One, and it ties them into that conversation very early on. So I would challenge all of you guys to go back and look at your elevator pitch and see if you can rephrase some of the telling statements about what you do into questions about what you solve for. A lot of folks in a lot of sales training and sales coverage talks about how you should be selling solutions or business outcomes rather than just speeds and feeds or benefits of your product. That's a very, kind of older method of selling and advertising. Whereas, again, listening for and delivering business outcomes that make things better or save money or save time is really, if you can attach your product to those, it's a much deeper connection to that buyer. Does that make sense? Okay. Man, they got me involved because I'd be animated, and now it's on video. I'm just trying to move around and be herky jerky, right? So, okay, how we doing on time here? We going good? Preparation tape template. Okay, for all of your interactions, and again, because there's a wide range of teams and ideas and things that you guys have created represented today. Thinking through that process of, how transactional is our sale or how long-term is our sale? Who's going to be involved in typically making that decision? Is it an individual? Is it a collective? Is it a, family, a head of household? Think through how you typically make buying decisions and then how your family typically makes buying decisions. If you need some milk, anybody in the household can probably go out and grab a $2 jug of milk. If you need a refrigerator, you're probably going to go after that purchasing decision a little bit differently. Do some research online, look at some different models, maybe go to Home Depot and talk to somebody. Think through the refrigerator that you have, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it. So try to put your offering into that type of a scenario and think through who's all going to be involved in making that decision and making sure that you're talking to each person that might be involved in that decision, and also thinking through not only who's going to champion that cause for you and who's going to say yes and have the authority to make that sale or make that purchasing decision, but also who's going to be the detractor or potentially object to your offering. And so, again, going back to close ratios and planning for how many targets you're going to have in order to achieve a number of units sold, also think through what are the potential objections that we're going to hear and be ready to overcome those once you've validated yourself and asked enough questions to the prospect that then maps back to overcoming those objections, right? So again, the more you ask questions and give that opportunity for the prospect to tell you what they're motivated by or trying to solve for, the more you can anticipate what an objection might be and then use those questions or comments that they made, the feedback that they gave you to fill in what your solution solves for, so that they're less likely to object or to say no. Ultimately, in sales, one of my past leaders talked about a big portion of what you're trying to do is change somebody's mind. So if they're there to say no to what you're selling, you're there to understand what may get them to a yes. And also know that in sales, because we talked about that close ratio, it's okay that some folks say no. And also how much time you have to prospect. It's good for somebody to get to a no. It's good if you think somebody's a potential prospect and going to say yes. It's very bad if somebody is a maybe, because they're going to take time and energy away from folks who either quickly say no or people that could be saying yes. So also know as you're planning and thinking through, is this a transactional sale or not? As you're building out that plan, factor in, how much time do we have to cultivate that relationship or not, so that you're not wasting time with people who might be maybes or ultimately say no to whatever your solution is. Any questions so far? I want to make sure we get an opportunity to interact a little bit.
Anybody have any questions?
How do you approach setting goals, like in sales?
So, from a company standpoint, a lot of times their sales, goals are sort of set for you. But as the, CEOs and champions of your own company, you really need to understand market factors and what the potential of your sellers, who are right now are you, have time and attention for. Again, is the goal, just monetization at any point? Is the goal a specific amount of revenue? So if it's a specific amount of revenue, for example, I would set that bar and then again work backwards to factor in how many units or transactions do we need to have in order to achieve that revenue bar of, $1,000, $1 million, $50,000. Work backwards from there, and again factor in that 20% close ratio to know the number of prospects that you're going to need to then target and talk to in order to potentially achieve that revenue goal. If it's just a number of sales or units, you can also just kind of again back into that number through how many folks you have on your team, how many folks they're going to need to be talking to, and how much you think you can ultimately achieve. But typically in your planning stage, obviously you guys should, again, probably just pick some arbitrary numbers around revenue that you think you can achieve based on what the cost of your thing is. You can look at other market factors. If you do have known competitors, look at that market and what they're typically doing. If you're in a position where you don't have any known competitors, you need to think about what the opportunity is that people are not going to do something with you, or they're not going to understand that why they need your good or service. That's really what your competition would be. So try to think through all the different factors, or again, come up with a number, and then I like to try to back into it. But typically, you want to set those for an annualized basis, and also quarterly, as well as maybe even now that we're sort of getting down to the end of the year, right? Probably even weekly, on a case-by-case basis. And a lot of you guys may be in a position where you're not going to be able to monetize anything really before you go into your final pitch night, and that's okay, and it's fairly typical with startups. But you want to be thinking through, okay, once we launch this, we feel like we can get this many units sold in this amount of time. And if we add dollars to increase our funnel, i.e. go after more prospects, we can then, plan for this many more. So understanding what that cost is going to be, or how many you think you can sell in, locally, and then multiplying that to, okay, if we just sell in San Antonio, we know we have this many people that we're limited to in the demographic that we're selling to. Okay, if we then are selling in San Antonio and Austin, then you can look at those numbers, or then San Antonio, Austin, and Houston, or whatever it might be. You want to look at what are the limiting factors of the market, number of people or number of prospects that are potentially in that demographic you're selling to, and then do some fuzzy math to sort of back into what portion or market share you guys think you can capture initially, short term, and then long term. Does that help?
Good. And Chase typed in a question in the chat that said, how can we sell our product efficiently even though we're going through through an economic crisis?
Good. Well, obviously, if you're selling hugs right now, you're kind of SOL. So it's a crazy new normal, and everybody is having to face that. So the good news is there's going to be a massive amount of opportunity that comes from all of this change, and the economy, as poorly as the stock market or other factors may be doing. Obviously, unemployment is up, and those are kind of big scary things. There's always going to be an opportunity for smart entrepreneurs to take advantage of things. So how you should approach and factor this, it's absolutely something you should talk about. There's going to be different areas that tend to be more challenged in a down economy, and you need to think through who the buyer is, and is that going to affect you guys? Obviously, let's look at things that are wants versus needs, right? So wants, people probably won't spend as much on luxury goods and more frivolous things, because they're going to be focusing their money on taking care of their family and paying their mortgage and buying food. So factor in, is your good, your service, your business, more of a need like that it's more of a luxury type benefit. And if that's the case, you want to factor that into your business plan, certainly in the immediate future, to account for that. And or potentially companies, are delaying launches or pushing things. I know a lot of the movie releases obviously have been pushed because people can't go to the movie theaters right now. And that's going to affect what their weekend box office numbers, which when you're in the movie business is absolutely critical, right? So obviously a lot of the business and economic factors are somewhat unknown, and that's part of what you guys will get as you get more mature in business. But understanding how that's going to affect your sales will show to investors or potential investors as you guys are making your pitch. You absolutely want to address the COVID situation and the current market factors that are going to affect everybody that's on this call and everybody's idea in some form or fashion. So I do think it's good to, again, remove that objection that nobody's going to buy this because we can't go out or because it's so uncertain. That's not necessarily the case, but you do want to think through how and why people are going to object to it and potentially have a reason to object because of the current situation. And you need to factor the rationale around why they should say yes, because you're helping them save money or avoid risk or be better at something. Again, think through how they're motivated and how the current crisis is affecting their decision making, and then sort of flip it so that you can leverage whatever you do to hopefully help them solve one of those challenges that they're going to face. Make sense?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So absolutely, definitely want to plan and sort of go into your sales and do some prep work for those. Practice in the mirror, practice on your parents, practice on your friends. It is very helpful for you to kind of talk things through and prep, take notes, whatever format helps you the most. But having that practice will absolutely come through when you guys go to sell your pitches. If there's other, factors on the team, and depending on who has more experience or not, depending on maybe some jobs you've had, think through how sales is used in some of those kind of regular jobs. And on some of the interactions you guys have right now, obviously you may not be going out since we're all stuck at home, but think through when you were out at a restaurant, or maybe if you went to make a large purchase with your parents, or you made a large purchase yourself, was there a store clerk or a waiter or somebody who really made that experience better because they understood what you were doing? And again, a waiter can just be providing good service, but they can also be suggestively selling you different choices on the menu or different drinks that you might not have thought about trying. That's going to increase that restaurant's profit because they took the time to sort of ask you or suggestively sell you on something. So again, while you're trying to build that script feel free to practice and leverage outside factors from folks that you like or that you understand. If you want to, while you're home watching a lot of Netflix and TV shows, if you guys have heard of the show Mad Men with Don Draper, it's an awesome series around advertising in the 50s and 60s. There's 4 Rules of Selling by Don Draper. You can go look up on the internet, and it talks through all of the factors along with some of the clips from the show. But his ability to listen and craft a pitch in that TV show is probably one of my favorites. There's some fun movies. Hopefully, if you guys are old enough to watch R-rated movies, Wolf of Wall Street obviously has got some fun selling clips, and there's an older movie from the 80s that's based on the same story called Boiler Room. Actually, it's maybe from the 90s. That's got Giovanni Ribisi in there. But I would watch some of those. You can look at if you guys have ever seen the Always Be Closing skit that they make fun of on a lot of popular culture and Saturday Night Live. That's from a movie called Glengarry Glen Ross. You can absolutely go through and watch some of those movies to talk through at least the clips, and you can do a search on YouTube around sales movies and things like that, and some of those will pop up. But hopefully that helps to get you motivated. And know that your objections that you're handling aren't going to come just from the people that you're potentially selling to. Obviously, those are going to come from people who are technically there to help you or guide you or mentor you. The group that I worked with last year, they had a lot of pushback from the teams that they pitched just because they couldn't necessarily get the physical prototype to work. And we really stagnated and struggled with that quite a bit. And I think they didn't embrace that objection early enough in their talk track in order to overcome that, because each time that they presented to the different the groups, or ultimately when they went through the pitch night, I think that was a factor that sort of worked against them. So really thinking through those objections and or trying to overcome those early is pretty key to building out your pitch template and making sure that you guys all practice it. And then you want to have multiple versions of that pitch template as well. Think through, okay, you may meet somebody down at the store, or you might meet another parent who's interested. You want to have a quick, few-minute version that sort of asks for the right, tells about what you do, and then sees if they're interested. And then if they are interested, you can have a little bit longer version, potentially where you're leaving a voicemail or picking up the phone or sending somebody an email. Especially if you know somebody's interested or they've been referred to you by somebody who's bought your offering before, then you have that right to ask for and engage with them a little bit deeper. So obviously that pitch sheet that you use with them is going to be a little bit longer, a little bit more in depth. So having a kind of, elevator pitch, a little bit longer version, and then, a couple different versions based on how that person is motivated is important to think through in your different factors. And then you really just need to kind of practice as a team. I would say, again, try going cold and picking up maybe one of your family members and calling them. Try to not hum and awe and in and all through it, just like all the things you guys have been doing as you go through your speech preparations and your presentation. Definitely the more that you can practice and refine that and stay calm and stay on track will certainly shine through. And I think will absolutely come across in how you guys present and pitch your offerings to potential customers.
That's good.
Try to make sure I touch on some of the other bullets. I didn't know if.
So one of the things we're going to talk about next week is going back to our financial models. And I don't know why, for some reason this year, I feel like we haven't spent as much time with them, but maybe it's just because there's so much heavy stuff at the very end. The last sessions are all about financials. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about finishing out their financial models and really going back and visiting them, you have here about cost of sales. How do mm-hmm. they start thinking about the costs associated with those sales, especially, we're thinking about it currently and for the future?
Okay. So for me in my role, obviously for Microsoft, I am, one of their biggest cost of sales, and me and the rest of my thousands of peers across the company, obviously they factor in to what they charge for their software, for their cloud tools, the fact that they have to pay all their employees and their sellers to go out there and offer this to the market. So you guys, most of you probably won't have any sales folks that you're having to pay, but ultimately when you kind of start, typically the first person you're going to hire, or some of the first few hires you have as your company gets a little bit more mature, would be sales folks. So right now you guys are all the sellers, and obviously understanding how you're going to factor your own compensation if the company does start to monetize is part of what you want to think through initially. But also, don't forget the other factors. If your offering is more transactional, if you guys can potentially sell through an Amazon store, if you can take credit cards, there's a cost of doing business associated with each one of those. Thinking through what that might be, even if it's very small, 1%, 2%, 3% of your overall sale, is very important. And again, is going to show your potential investors that you've done that homework. So ultimately, the cost of sale is also time. Your time is extremely valuable. My time is valuable. Thank you so much for giving us time this afternoon. But if it's going to take multiple conversations, multiple meetings, and multiple interactions with a prospect, you need to factor that in to your overall cost of sales. Meaning, you guys only have so much time in the day dedicated to business incubator and your startup. Across your team, how much can you physically go out and prospect in order to get to the number of folks that you want to talk to and then ultimately sell to? So factor in that time and attention as part of your cost of sales now, since most of you are in a position where you're kind of doing this for free until you monetize. That cost of sale could be just your time until you ultimately start to transact on the platform or potentially pay a credit card. There's other costs like marketing and prospecting that ultimately do or don't factor in, and then you'll probably talk through with some of your financial folks. Different companies have different ways of looking at how they factor in those costs and taking advantage of it. A lot of companies will have salespeople that are what you've probably heard of, straight commission, where basically that salesperson only gets compensated when a sale is made. They don't also have a salary. So, that's another factor to think about. Those roles typically tend to be very lucrative, but they're also very challenging for folks to take on. So, and they can be a little bit scary because you sort of don't have that underlying merit. So ultimately, how you would build out your sales force once your company becomes more mature is something that you guys should be thinking through as the principles of your startup.
Okay, well, we have time for just a couple of questions, unless there's anything else you want to add, Mr. Sheedy. But if y'all will all turn back on your cameras, I'm going to try to take a group shot because I can see all of you on the screen now with my new little grid trick. I'm going to try to take a group shot of all of us. So, yeah, I can see all y'all fiddling with your hair now. Getting rid of that bed head. I thought of another question. So do you think is since you work for Microsoft, Mr. Sheedy, everyone's turning their cameras back on, is Google the enemy? Are they a partner? Are they competition for you? How do you view them?
So, it breaks my heart that Alamo Heights has chosen to use Google Tool and not Microsoft Teams. No. So Microsoft, and you guys may have heard this if you're paying attention to some of the downturns in the market. Microsoft is what's called top 5 market cap companies in the world, basically. So Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, Google are some of the largest companies in the world now. And that's very different even from 5 or 10 years ago, where there was other companies like Exxon or oil and gas companies that were part of those largest companies. So a lot of why that is because of the way that data and massive amounts of data are really going to continue to shape business decision making going forward. So absolutely Google is a competitor, absolutely Amazon is a competitor, but there's things that we do to leverage both tools, and obviously companies are going to make the decision and probably use from all 3 of those competitors. There's a lot of technology companies that we partner with but then also compete with, so it's a fairly complex landscape, but There's also an Asian company called Alibaba. If you guys heard of Jack Ma, he's the richest person in China. He actually donated a bunch of money and masks to the U.S. effort here as well. But those are, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Alibaba are probably the big 4 global companies in cloud computing. And so, paying attention to that. And what I meant about data and artificial intelligence, when I started selling in technology, one of the things that's always benefited me in my career was sort of thinking about what's next and being educated on that so that you provided value to your customers. When I started, people didn't know how to configure a physical server, and a server is just a big, supercomputer that's going to run your website, your widget, your application. But they needed to call me to buy the memory they needed and put the hard drive in and make sure all of the ports and everything was done correctly. Well, then Dell came out with a website where you could just click through and do all that. So all of a sudden that value that I used to add as a seller was negated by a competitive solution in the marketplace. So I had to, re-educate myself and really learn about newer technologies like storage area networks and advanced networking, things that were more complicated than that just basic server deals that I had been selling, so that I could continue to add value. So it's important to think about your offering, your company, what you guys do now, but also what are the market factors that are, changing where that solution is going to go in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, and really try to be out on the cutting edge, so that you can constantly be evolving that. That's how companies stay healthy, and baking that into your presentation and your pitch and your investor packets is really going to be thoughtful to show them that you're thinking about now, but also where you want to go. Even if you have an exit strategy and your idea is to cash out and bro down, that's okay. But knowing how you get there and your potential buyers would take it from there will show that you've put some thought into it. So.
Does anybody have any questions that you want to ask before our session's over?
When will we have class next?
So I don't know what time our sessions are going to be, our coach sessions are going to be next week, but I will let you know. It will be up before Sunday, but you'll have your team check-ins with us on Monday and Tuesday.
Okay.
Sales stuff though. Anybody have any questions about sales stuff?
Not
Did you
me.
guys ask me those questions? Hey, I saw also that your big boss donated. Did you see his interview yesterday?
With Satya or with Bill Gates?
With Bill Gates donating $100 million to
Hey,
coronavirus.
yeah.
Pretty cool.
So that's good. Good stuff. Also, you guys as I said earlier, and something I talked about with your teachers and getting ready for this is, we think about how you're selling yourselves, right? All of you guys are probably going to have some college admissions interviews soon if you haven't done so already. All of you guys are going to be selling your parents on, why you should or shouldn't go, do something fun this summer, or why they should potentially invest in you to go do something else that you want to do, whether it's a senior trip or a trip with your buddies or getting you a new car. So in those next conversations that you have, leverage that to think through logically, think why your parents are going to say no, and some of the things that you can do to potentially allow them to say yes, why it would be beneficial for them. Think about how they're motivated, again, towards and away, and then how you can make your ask a benefit for them versus something that they're going to, perceive as detract away from, right?
That's good. All right, any questions? All right, well, thank you, Mr. Sheedy, for your session today.
All right, hope you guys got something out of it. I know this isn't optimal how we wanted to be together, but best we can do under certain circumstances. So I appreciate everybody taking their time and logging in, and hopefully you had fun. If you have questions or something that comes up after the fact, you guys can ping me on LinkedIn or get a hold of me through your teachers. I'm happy to support this initiative through the community. It's really, really an awesome class. I hope every one of you guys leverages the network of mentors and coaches beyond just this class. Take advantage of those folks as you're, needing applications for college, as you're needing applications for internships, and then ultimately, once you're out of college, as you're needing jobs. think back through this extremely awesome network of folks that are involved in the Business Incubator program, and every single one of them, I guarantee you, would be willing to give you a hand if they can. So I encourage you to leverage the heck out of it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you. Y'all are welcome to unmute and say goodbye and thank you before you head out. But we really do appreciate your time. I'm sure you're really busy as well, so we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks, Mr. Sheedy.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
sir.
Thank you.
sir. Thank you.
Think about
Thank
the virtual handshaking that's going on right now.
Yeah, I
Virtual
love this grid